Alright, getting ready for a fairly long session today. The security chapter is pretty big, and we'll probably take a break halfway through just to refresh everybody. Alright, so this chapter will talk about security. This will be not only just security as far as securing a device, it'll also talk about physical security, procedurals, and types of threats that we can come across, and our usual, troubleshooting guide at the end. So we'll talk about securing workstations, wireless security, and then basic troubleshooting again. Now, again, I'm going to shorten troubleshooting down to just the first slide. It's the usual suspects in the slides for troubleshooting processes. So it just expands on the 6 that we've seen in every chapter along this course. So I'm not going to go over those slides again. And again and again. You know where they are, the last section of each chapter. Alright, so we'll kick off with malware. So this is basically just sources of malware. Now, malwares can be from many types of sources. So it can be, downloading free programs. It can be getting something from a friend, such as a USB, opening an email and activating a file that's attached to the email. Anything that can cause a threat or harm to your system can loosely be classed as malware. Okay, so generally speaking, it is installed on your machine without your knowledge, and once it's infected, it can do multiple things or nothing. The most benign is just, giving you a warning that you've got an infection, but today's environment, that's pretty non-existent. Most of them want to cause you some form of harm, deleting files, corrupting or changing your config files, that sort of thing. So what's the difference between viruses and Trojan horses? Not much. Just the way we look at them, really. So virus is the most common malware you'll get, which basically requires a user to have some form of interaction with the virus for it to propagate or self-replicate within the system. Whereas Trojan horses basically do not require that interaction. So basically they're an automatic code that will self-replicate under certain conditions. Okay, like when you're playing a game or using a piece of software, it will propagate itself. So the difference there between the Trojan and the virus is the virus explicitly needs the user to have interaction directly with the virus file for it to trigger, whereas a Trojan horse can just be attached and hidden in something else that can just run, and it doesn't need that direct interaction with the user for it to propagate. Okay, so we have the usual suspects here. So adware, we've all had the annoying ads just propagate through most of our web browsers and things like that. Most of those are stopped these days with the pop-up blockers that are pretty standard on web browsers now. Ransomware we've all heard about, where It basically encrypts your drives, and you've got to give them money for them to unencrypt it. Never goes well. My advice is have things backed up and just delete your system if you get it. Don't give them money. It's just, once they know you will give them money, they'll keep coming after you. It's a typical scenario of blackmailers. Rootkits are where the system is compromised at admin level. So basically the virus or whatever is occurring is running at an admin level, so it's got basically full access to the machine. Spyware is like adware, but it's there to gather information about the machine and its users and send that back out to the orchestrator. And worms are like Trojans. They're self-replicating and do not need any assistance from users to propagate through the system. So the best protection against this, besides not being online and not doing anything ever, is having good, up-to-date antivirus programs, okay, and keeping those up to date and your systems patched will help you protect against various malware. Okay, so today's antivirus systems use signature files, and we update the database of these signature files. And basically what these signature files do is they indicate the type of behavior that the antivirus is trying to identify, and once certain behavior characteristics are identified, it will flag against one of these signature files and give you a warning and quarantine the files for you to take action against. So how can you fix it? Well, you can, if it's a well-known one, the antivirus software will have its own fix in the database for it to remove the infected files. The other thing you could do is potentially use your system restore points to restore back to a configuration before the malware was installed. That's not always a viable solution because some of the some of the viruses and that actually attack your restore points, your config files. So that may not be a viable option. As I said, the best option is keeping your files up to date and backed up, and worst case scenario, just re-image the machine and keep going. 9 times out of 10, it's the fastest way, especially in enterprise. It's kind of a go-to system. They have a standard operating environment, and they just swap out the machines and re-image them at their leisure. Network information can be obtained from various sources such as Google, Whois, and other discovery tools like port scanners and things like that. Basically, a ping sweep will sweep a whole heap of addresses, and where it gets a confirmation of address, it gives them a address that they can start attacking against and do more intrusive gathering, such as doing port scans using Nmap or SuperScan. There's other tools out there. The next step is to run a scanner to determine what applications and operating systems you're running, and from that start exploiting those known vulnerabilities to see if they haven't been patched out. Because especially with the smaller businesses and that, people don't keep their systems up to date and they don't patch their applications, so known vulnerabilities can be exploited quite easily. Okay, TCP/IP have vulnerabilities within the protocols themselves, because the protocols were created to make the network robust, and because of their inbuilt fault tolerances and things like that, they can be exploited to provide denial of service. And the other one there, DNS poisoning, is where rather than blocking the target with just overwhelming traffic and flooding their IP addresses through a denial of service, they actually change the DNS entries in the registers out on the net and provide false address records so that the traffic goes somewhere else. Man-in-the-middle attacks basically intercept traffic between two destinations, and it generally is used to impersonate a portion of the traffic, and so all the traffic is diverted through that central point so they can actually see both directions of the traffic and gather information. Replay is a spoofing attack where they capture the authenticated packets and then send them on. And the last one there, SYN flood, is basically where they take the actual TCP protocol's handshaking method and exploit it. So under TCP, if you remember, you have a greeting, hello, I'm sending you information, and here's the next sequence number, and it will reply back with an acknowledgement, part of the handshake, but it never gets that third part. So it's opening, expecting more information that never arrives. And they do this over and over again, so all your buffers fill up, and then they can attack using other methods. So what is 0 day and 0 hour terms when we're talking about threats? So 0 hour is when the actual exploit is discovered, and 0 day is where the exploit is basically sent out. Okay, so they're kind of the same thing. So the day is the date that it's discovered, and the hour is the exact time that it is discovered. Okay, so so the first point there, once it's discovered, so we have no idea how long it's been happening prior to 0 hour, but the time between 0 hour and where the patching starts occurring, those vulnerabilities are totally usable by everybody that knows about them. So basically the way it works is you get a patch coming out, then they research and monitor whether the patch is successful in it and update any releases to the patch system, and again checking to make sure that it's working and refining the patch, and basically then they if a third one's required, it's rinse and repeated until they refine it down to a perfect solution. Not that there's ever really a perfect solution. There is a little thing about engineering, and it's that for every solution we come up with, we tend to create 2 more issues. So there's always that. So how do we protect against these things? Well, we can have a layered approach so that there's multiple areas that an attacker has to get through for them to actually compromise the network. Now, this is a combination of different systems working together to protect the network, and it's not just a firewall, it's not just the router. Okay, so they are devices that help us in our fight, but we need to have more than just a single solution. We need to have multiple tools in our arsenal to protect ourselves from exploiting. Now, social engineering, it works quite well, as if anybody's been watching any of the news recently, you would have heard about the great Twitter hack, where they actually social engineered some of the admins of Twitter and got access to the administrative accounts of some staff, and then exploited that in to gain access to accounts. Now, the visible end of it was where they did the scam for the cryptocurrency, but most people that deal with security would think, and are probably right in the thinking with the stuff that I've read and seen online, is that was their final how do you do, and rather than their actual ultimate goal. Yes, PlayStation, yes, that was a while ago. There was another big one that made big news because Sony had to admit that their security failed, and potentially all these credit cards and that were compromised, so they had a legal obligation to announce that one, because a lot of people could have had their credit cards compromised. Whereas Twitter, a great many of us on the forums are waiting for the hackers to actually release all the dirty detail of the private direct messages on those big accounts that they had access to. It'd be interesting to see the behind the scenes conversations on some of those accounts. So how does social engineering work? It's basically somebody either talking to you or emailing you to get you to divulge information about yourself, and from that information they can get your passwords and things like that. Now, I think it was RMIT here in Melbourne that spent a couple of weeks, the professor and the students, devising a survey, and basically they went out to the city square around lunchtimes and basically got people to fill out this survey, which seemed to be just general questions, and basically what they were able to do by inducing them to fill out the survey with giving away ticket vouchers for the local cinema, they compromised 35 people's banking accounts and then sent the bank and the people notifications. Basically, they got into the accounts, took screenshots, and then exited out and sent notifications to the banks and the users themselves that they were social engineered and that the security procedures needed to be strengthened, and this was one of their activities in the classroom. Now, me personally, I would have loved to have been in that class. I think that would have been a very fun assignment to be given out by the professor. Alright, so social engineering, the biggest one here, personation, is the one that we have had, well, I've had personal experience on. Company I work for, we caught a couple of people just roaming around the office. Okay, business suits, and they were caught by, believe it or not, our tea lady. This was the only firm that I've actually ever seen a tea lady in. Actually, she used to go around with a trolley with a, like in the old movies, with the cups and make tea and coffee for people on the floor. Her job, besides that was a secondary job, but her primary job was looking after the board of directors, because our office had the board meeting all the time, so she looked after all the important high-level meeting, catering and governance, catering and all that sort of stuff. But her area was near one of the emergency doors, and she noticed somebody do something a little bit suspicious, and after they moved on, she went and checked that door, and they basically jammed the latch open. So the door looked closed, the emergency door, but it would be able to be opened from outside because the latch was jammed open, so it didn't lock. She notified security, we caught them and handed them over to the authorities. But that goes to show how easy it is for somebody with kahunas to actually just walk past and through a business, behaving for the world like if they belong there, to do an attack. So now, how many of you have had somebody call you up saying they're from a company and they just want a moment of your time and ask you just to confirm your identity to them? Yeah. Who says it's a legitimate call? Alright. Can I have your name? Confirm your name. Can I confirm your date of birth? Thank you. That matches our records. Alright. So the most common thing to do is people to just give that information out. So it's easy. Dumpster diving down the bottom. Haven't seen a great deal of that happening these days, but in the 80s, it was 60s to 80s, that was a very big thing to do. And because back then, very little people, not many people in businesses shredded documents, but as a common trait. I can't remember the name of the movie now. Hackers. Pretty sure it was that. And it's sort of mid-80s movie. One of the old style hackers used to do the dumpster diving and, piecing together the the strips of information, and there was a young guy. They're all sitting around trying to get the job, and there was a young guy, you know, did it all via electronics, and he got conned into, I think the guy spilled a drink on him, he had to rush off, and the older guy just grabbed his folder because it looked more impressive. Yeah, not a bad film, not totally realistic, but it was fun to watch anyway. Right, back to this. Excuse me. So we need to be aware of social engineering and to protect yourself. So don't give out your names and passwords or credentials to anybody, especially over the phone. If you see suspicious individuals, report them. Unsolicited emails that you don't know where they come from, don't click on them to open up different things. Don't leave your credentials laying around on your desk because somebody walking by can find them. And don't use the same passwords for home and work and things like that, because if you're using the same passwords across multiple accounts, somebody's just got to crack one and then they've got them all. So just be aware of that one. Alrighty, how are we going? 30. Yep, Brad. It's quite common, especially with Hotmail. Especially in the early days of Hotmail, it was very unsecure and it happened a lot. Okay, and the other thing, if you don't secure if you've got an email server and it's not locked down properly, they can bounce emails via your server, and it looks like the source of those email spams came from your email server. So there's all sorts of things that can occur in compromised systems. So what's the security policy? A policy is a set of rules and objectives that help you identify what to protect, so what assets need protection, potential threats to those assets, what to do in the event of a breach of security, and the procedures in training and educating your users and basically people using your system of what to do, how to protect it. So basically it's how to educate all your users about identifying and protecting systems. So within a security policy, you will have these topics covered as a general rule: identification and authentication policies, password policies, susceptible use. Now, you're going to, okay, your password policies are: how often do I renew your password? How many characters does it have to be? What type of character combinations has to be there? Susceptible use is, remember, it is generally a business system and it's owned by the company, and any private use is frowned upon generally. Most companies will accept some private usage on their systems, but you are made aware that everything created and transmitted across their network belongs to them, so they have the right to look and read everything that goes across their networks. Just be aware of that. Remote access, so basically who can gain access to the systems. Now today more and more of us are taking that one for granted, especially in today's environment. But a lot of time, businesses really do limit the remote access to the network. It basically means they limit the number of doors into their system. Network maintenance, how often and what periods can maintenance occur in, and what sort of notifications have to be given and procedures taken when maintenance occurs. So they need to be able to back up, make sure all the data is backed up, that the business isn't impacted unduly and that sort of thing. Then lastly, incident handling policies. This is the what do you do in the event of a breach document. So, you know, if you discover it, what do you do? How do you notify? Who do you notify? What do you do to mitigate it if it's an ongoing system? That sort of thing. So there's all the words again. So we can skip those because we basically talked about it on the other slide. Physical security. So your servers and devices that need to be secured should be in a secure room that has a secure lock on it. So you need to restrict access to these areas to only authorized personnel, and you need some form of monitoring. Now, the most common form of monitoring for smaller organizations is they put their racks and that in a glass room that is visible, so people can just glance in and see if there's people in there, and it's generally in front of the IT guys that know who should be there and who shouldn't. In larger organizations, they have a lot of CCTV. So types of locks, you've got your conventional deadbolts, your electronic locks, tokens, our biometrics, or a combo of any and all of those things to give you locking. Now, none of these are really fail-safe. They're all there to A, slow down a potential attack, and B, to give an alarm pre or post breach. If it's just a physical lock, it's generally post because you'll see the damage to the door. If it's electronics, you can get it as it's occurring, or pre, because if it still maintains its lock, it can send an alarm saying it's being tampered with. One of the things that you should do for physical secure is have man trap. This is basically a room with two doors. It's a walkthrough. So you have a type of lock on the outside and secondary lock on the inside, which is of a different type. You get through the first door, that door closes behind you, and then you need to attempt to get through the second security door before you get through into the secure area. So these generally in a high security environment can be secured quite quickly and easily, and my first experience with one of these was in the French consulate here in Melbourne. That was fun. Opened the first door. It was a little room, not much bigger than a closet, with glass doors, but they were lock solid. You basically got scanned while you're there, and then somebody opened it on the other end to let you into the actual embassy itself. they were having a good look at my radio, because I had electronics on me at the time, so they were having a good read of that equipment. Okay, securing computers and hardware. So basically we know that we need to secure our actual devices, but we also need to secure our cabling and our devices such as our switches and routers. We need to do this because if they have access to the cabling and routers and switches, they can compromise those systems easily. I can quickly and easily rebuild and compromise a router, a switch, very easily. I can put a simple clip around Cat5 cable, Cat6 cable, and that clip will tell me what every electronic pulse going along that cable contains. So having physical access leads to compromise. So you need to take into account those things. Now, I worked for government departments where we actually have secure networks, and the cabling is in clear conduit, so you can actually see the cables. So you can actually, and where they have to do joiners and that, it's all behind clear plastic perspex viewing plates. So all the joins are visible, all the cabling's visible. So if anything's ever tampered, it can be visually inspected and picked up very quickly. For an example, on secure, that side of things. So equipment and data, you need to know how your equipment's used, where it's located, and what type of traffic is going to go through it. So if the equipment's going to be in a public place, then you need additional protection against vandalism and theft. If it's call center, they're saying that the doors need to be locked and so forth. So basically, we need to protect our data because the data and knowledge, information is key to success in today's, whether it's business success, espionage, whatever you like, competitive loss. If you've got a new product coming out and a competitor finds out about it and is able to get a jump on you, you lose that competitive edge, and can actually suffer financial problems. So basically, data lost or stolen can cost the organization financial problems as well as legal problems, depending on the type of data that is lost. So we need to protect that data from loss using encryption while we're moving it around various networks, making sure all our users have the correct permission levels. So are they authorized to look at in a file or folder? Are they authorized to modify it? So we need to have correct procedures and policies in place to correct access or monitor access as well. Backups, so there's many different backup and restore utilities out there. Most of them have some form of default that comes with an operating system, whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux. And there's a bucket load of third-party proprietary software and hardware available for that purpose. So files and folder permissions, where are we? Editing time. Okay, we've got another 5 slides before we change a topic, so I'll get through these and then I'll take a break to get up and stretch the legs. Alright, permissions, rules. So within each file system you will have basically the full control, modify, read and execute, read and write access. Now most users will get a combination of these given to them, and under the rules, basically if you have the rights in the parent folder, you'll have the same rights in any subsequent children of that folder. So any subfolders or files tend to inherit the rights of the folder that is above them. So these permissions are given to users or groups, and it enables you to have access control over your data. So encryption is one solution to protecting data. Now remember, encryption by its very nature is meant to be unencrypted. So when we're encrypting data using this system, we're trying to protect what's in the encryption for a specific length of time. Basically, we are trying to protect the data until the data is no longer critical. Okay. Every encryption can be broken. It is just a matter of time. So some of the things that we can use is BitLocker. Okay. Don't lose your password if you use it, because there's no recovery. If you record your BitLocker password on your Microsoft account, you may be able to recover the drive, but other than that, you basically throw the drive away as far as the data is concerned. Because to get through the encryption, you basically reformat the drive. Okay, data wiping. Now, most of our data storage is stored in a magnetic format. So we can wipe it via the data wiping software, where it basically just rewrites information over the top a number of times. Then the other way there is a degaussing wand, which is basically a magnet that's held over the drive platters to jumble up the magnetic fields on the platters, basically making them unreadable. And then the next one there is your electromagnetic degaussing device, which is a degaussing wand on steroids. So massive magnets that the hard drives are sent in, and they can erase basically all the data off a drive within seconds rather than minutes. And the last one there is the shredding of the drive. Okay, so not actually using magnets. If you've got secure drives, you will see people actually go through the process of doing all of those steps and then taking the physical drive that's been wiped and putting them through mechanical shredders to actually shred the physical components of the drive. It just comes down to what level of security classification the drives have on them. This doesn't mean that data doesn't fall through the cracks, and occasionally things get out there without being wiped. I've actually received a second-hand drive with company data on it. It was never wiped. Via auction. It was interesting. Nice read. SSDs, flash memory, so they don't have magnetic platters. So basically you need to be very... So really, if you want to protect the data on those devices, the best way is to shred them, because degaussing is not effective. And so can't really, they say secure arrays to fully ensure, but I know there are counter software for actually reversing the erasure procedures. So again, destroying them is your best policy, shredding them. Alright. So destroying hard drives fully is the only way to ensure that the data is there, and depending on, they can be recycled into gold. They're precious metals. Electronics is full of precious metals, so they can be recycled in that way. Low-level format, you don't see this out in the world very much anymore, because the vendors do the low-level format on their drives before it goes to retail sectors now. So when you're in a workplace, you only do high-level formatting, which is pretty easy to reverse if you've got the right tools. Alright, so that's about the halfway point, so we'll take a break there and we'll come back to it in a little while. So I'll hit this pause button, stop button actually, and we'll come back for part 2 later.